was me, probably 6, 7 years old, wearing shorts and banyan and walking down the streets of Assam. I was born in Assam, northeast of India, and I sang Hawa Hawa, Hawa Dil Ko Pata, and I think that upset my neighbors a lot, and my parents got some complaints saying, your son has gone out of hand. Right. So this is one of the earliest memories which I have burned all night. So I'm not supposed to do that. And Hawa Hawa, of course, is Hassan Jahangir's contribution to the world. Fantastic stuff. And then growing up, it has all been around discovering, Sayoni, that.
Boom boom and
yes. Yes, and so there was Junoon which came in live. There was String, and college was all around Purani Jeans with Ali Haider, because that's your go-to stuff song, right? You have that one guitarist in your group, and then everybody else can chime in because everyone knows the words to Purani Jeans. But it's not just this side of it; it's also realizing that there is Nusrat Fateh Ali Khan with his Afrin, there is Jula Jule Lal, there is Lambi Judai, which is almost from the early 80s from the movie Hero, and there was Reshma singing from Pakistan. And so looking back at it, realized a huge influence growing up in life has been these fantastic words, music, lyrics, and thoughts which came down.
They are an integral part of our pop culture as well, and I think that's something that we want to talk to you about. The fact that in a way because all of these things, they shaped the pop culture for India for the 80s, the 70s, the 90s, and then came Coke Studio, which just did the same thing all over again. But we know what it meant for us. But we've missed out on some nuances. The fact that Coke Studio, what it brought also to Pakistan was the traditional poetry. There was a certain amount of culture that almost was revived with this entire movement, and we've lost out on those nuances because we possibly learned about it later, but we didn't have that. What we would really love to understand from you, Zahra, is what did Coke Studio stand for Pakistan, and what was that perspective?
Really good to meet both of you. Thank you for inviting me. It's so nice to be able to talk about these things. It's of course it's meant something for the world, but it's really meant something for South Asia, also. In terms of really, Bollywood is one thing which brings us together, and then Coke Studio was the other thing which is bringing us together in the last several decades. What is Coke Studio meant for Pakistan? When these things start happening, and while you're in the middle of it, you don't sometimes know what's going on in what the ethos of that moment is. You're able to realize that much later in retrospect. When Coke Studio started, it was a terribly violent time in Pakistan, and we thought that when we were in that stage of, it was after 9/11. There were drone attacks, there were bombings every day. And sometimes it felt as if we'd never known any other life, and we would never know any other life in future also. So this is the moment, of course, this music began. Things were happening. Concerts were, because of all the violence, the danger of the political violence and the danger of having mass gatherings, concerts were nearly dead. Public concerts were nearly dead. And it was at this time that we see Coke Studio really reviving. Is my voice clear, by the way, to you? Or I could try adjusting it.
Your voice is clear, Zahra. There's a bit of a feedback, though. However, I'm just trying to verify from our audience if they all can hear us. So folks who are in right now, please be kind enough to just pop in with a quick response on the YouTube chat replay or on the LinkedIn side if you can hear us, or if you cannot, can you help us with that, please? All right. I do not see any. Yes, okay. I can see people saying they can hear us. I think things are fantastic. Okay. If any of you cannot hear us, it could be that you need to possibly put the speaker on out there crystal clear.
Fantastic.
Fantastic.
Please go on.
Back to you, Zahra.
Excellent. So, it was at this moment when this very niche activity began. Coke Studio was actually something that had happened elsewhere abroad. I believe possibly it began in South America, and not to the scale that it happened in Pakistan, but it happened in South America at that time. Then the vision of Ruhail Hayat, that Ruhail Hayat was part of Vital Science, which is possibly the most successful pop band that has not only emerged in Pakistan in history, but perhaps anywhere in South Asia. Vital Science was a huge pop band, and like many pop bands, initially, these people were experimenting with Western music and they were singing English things, but there was not a market out there. And producers asked them to sing Urdu, and then they sang Dil Dil Pakistan, and then they ended up becoming, you see, that's the entire thing. The influences are Western, but you have to produce in order to become big in South Asia. You need to produce in the languages of this region, and if you produce in Urdu, Hindi, of course, then that's a huge audience for you. So it was a niche project that started out, and it was an experimentation. It might have been something that he was, he reached a certain age. He had been doing Western music. Nusrat Fateh Ali Khan already had become very big. These people had been meeting the other big stars of Pakistan who were more classical or folk. And here he started to, his band was over, and he started to, just experiment with various things. And I don't think that he could have possibly thought it would become this big. But because he's a perfectionist and he brought certain kinds of resources to the forum, it's very important to note that Coke Studio produced very few original tracks throughout this decade, and its claim to fame are not the original tracks that it did produce. It was really the covers. And when I mean the covers, it's not just that it's using traditional poetry, etc., and giving it a different direction. Literally, not just the poetry was used, old poetry, but the old compositions were used. And what was happening was that they just, it's not just, now just is not a good word. They really gave it other musical influences, and that sound was more, I would say, let's say, if there's something called the apartheid of musical tastes, there was a big audience out there who was listening to their folk music without modern instruments, right? Without modern producers' input. And then there were people who were hearing totally like popular bands. But here they brought together the material of one audience and put the resources of another audience in it. So more people started hearing the same thing across class, across region, and there were so many languages that you would hear for the first time, not just the really high-end restaurant or the mall playing the same thing, and the rickshaw wala playing the same thing, and the mohallas playing the same thing. It's also very important how Pakistan received this thing. I know India received it totally online. How Pakistan received this thing was that it was used to be a Coca-Cola advertisement during the summertime or the autumn time, right? And they would buy slots on TV and they would play the music. So you see, it's really ends up reaching through the national broadcasters and all the channels. So that's how things would be launched for us. And those would be launched before the online launch at times. So that was really how it happened. And so it was a time that was very, if you think, very painful, very divisive. There had been these, in the cities, we would understand that there's a war next door. There have always been forces. In Swat somewhere, the Taliban are emerging. In Pakhtunkhwa somewhere, the Taliban are emerging. In Peshawar, we are feeling the effect of something that Afghanistan had felt during the 90s, that musicians were being threatened for doing music. So it was a terrible, for the national psyche, it was a terribly painful time. And it was a time where the state was sometimes being called upon to act against its own people, or maybe some other shadowy individuals who were carrying out terrorism. And there was this awareness that these people who were doing these activities which were murderous had some horrible baggage of their own. They were themselves victims of terrible violence and economic decline at one time. And then, so while we were calling the state to control the situation, there were also calls, and we could see the point of that, that you should not attack people with too much force, who are themselves, they are violent, but they are victims of their own circumstances. So it was such a divisive time. At that time, the president of our country, Musharraf, had recently there had been assassination attempts on him. So we didn't know what was happening exactly. It was a terrible time. So I want to really show you that in this time, when appearances of people, when ideology comes into question, there's someone who's modern, Western, trustworthy, who's not a terrorist, and there's someone who has a beard, who wears a desi clothes, someone who's looks like a folk musician, but to someone else he might look like the definition of a terrorist, right? So these are the cleavages in the cultural cleavages, the class cleavages. In all of this, a program emerges, and I'm not saying deliberately, but it's probably the ethos of the time, where people are like, oh, let's meet you. Let's try to understand you. I'm from a particular class. I'm anglicized. Let me try to figure out the languages being spoken outside my studio. Let me try for the first time to really seriously go out and see what music is being done, what my own traditions are, what's my relationship to the West. We have war, but of course we don't want the Taliban, but what about the people, what is the US to us, right? Are they also people who, are we comfortable being totally allied in their war on the many parts of the world? What is our position? Who should we ally with? So in that circumstances, when people from different linguistic class backgrounds, etc., and these are very different worlds coming together on the Coke Studio platform, come together to produce music in very unlikely times, very challenging times, then that's what it means to us. And then when that music is beamed out to the world, which we don't necessarily expect. So, quality doesn't always get the audience. We've had quality music in our part of the world for a very long time. One of the strengths of, Pakistan's national language is Urdu, and Urdu is one of the strongest poetic languages in South Asia. So many other languages here also rely greatly on really good poetry. So we've always had that. But through these resources, through the use of social media, particular kind of marketing, suddenly there's so much international interest, and that just keeps growing. And increasingly, we see ourselves as a global product. And so we see there's an image of us which is like, oh, what is this place, Pakistan? We can't visit it because it's too dangerous. Even people from other cities are scared of visiting the big cities, where there can be smaller cities, because there can be more bomb attacks there. We were like, okay, we can have two images. One is in the news media, the carnage, and the other is Coke Studio. So not only does it help build national identity, but also national dignity to a level, because we don't have to be reduced in the headlines or in the external, the foreign imagination only to carnage, which we are suffering, and which our people are suffering it, our people are perpetrating it, but we are both, what are we? Are we victims or are we aggressors? So it was, now this, after so long, the way that in the past few years, the bombs have gone down, many things have gone down, and we hope now with what has happened next door, that things don't become worse. A new conflagration doesn't happen, things go towards stability. But we couldn't even have imagined this 6-7 years ago, when Coke Studio was really coming out. So it was, just to sum it up, I would say it really affected in our national imagination. It helped give us a new national imagination, which is going to impact, have an impact for decades. At least decades. And secondly, it really helped us see, bring various kinds of Pakistanis from various classes and various appearances on one forum. And secondly, what it really did was it gave an alternate image of Pakistan to the world, which was, any country has many things going on, but not all of that is projected. But Coke Studio did help project, that there are other things also happening in this country.
I think you're absolutely right. That is it's such a beautiful history and an amalgamation of that, all of that context in which Coke Studio becomes another facet to look at Pakistan through, and what a beautiful facet. I cannot think of another more beautiful imagination in the face of so much uncertainty. I mean, it's a beautiful mirror to look at, and thank you. I'd never ever thought of it like that. That's absolutely beautiful. I think that tells us in a way what it is that Coke Studio we fell in love with as well. I think it was also. I think this is from one perspective, but I would love to hear yours. I think this exact imagination that you show, because the music obviously was beautiful, and a lot of it. The rest of the world, not just us, the rest of Southeast Asia, the rest of the world may not have understood the nuances in all the nuances of that music. But
it's like a college senior would tell a junior when he's introducing you to the music, saying, "Is music mein passion hai. This music is passion," right? So that's in college 1 year senior is also quite elder to you. As you grow older, this doesn't happen, right? So this elder introduces you, saying, "This is gold. Hold it." So a lot of us, when you have had this introduction to the music of Pakistan and Coke Studio, that is how we have known it, minus the larger context which I spoke about.
But I think that's exactly what it is. The fact that on one side it was the music, but it was the fact that there was also another facet that you're suddenly looking at and falling in love with every time that you listen to it, with every time that there's that song playing in your head. That's absolutely beautiful. Zahra, there's this question that we have, because when you look at Coke Studio, you see that there is exactly like you talked about it. There were so many dialects, there were so many languages. There was Punjabi, there was Urdu, there were so many different tribal. There were so many beautiful nuances. And how did you work with them? Can you talk to us about your experience with all of these different dialects and piecing them together?
It was such a very rich experience. You can say, in principle, I respect all the languages, but until you really have a chance to work with them all, you don't necessarily feel very close to them, because you're like, okay, yeah, it's nice. But when you really get into the words, and I was so lucky. Of course, I try to bring my understanding to everybody, and I hope to an extent successfully. But my own experience is just to talk to an artist really about his language. For example, when I talked to Akhtar Chanal Zehri, I don't know if you remember, there was a song which I think is one of the most interesting songs ever to be done in Coke Studio. It's a bit close to, in some ways, to rap. It's a traditional Baloch thing called Narbet, right? Which is like, a war song. And it's like so it's in Brahwi, which is a very interesting language. It's in Balochistan, but it has features which are not in common, which not similar to other Indo-European languages in Pakistan, because other languages in Pakistan are almost all Indo-European languages, yes, but Indo-Aryan languages, yes. But here, this language has elements which are much similar to Tamil. It's all the way in Balochistan, but it is. So if you hear, the language, Moni, Ravane, Sangatas, Kosara, Nazo, Ravare, Maste, Kanoke, Deo, Behat, Kutsare, so it's I don't know whether, but, it's got a different element to it. Yeah. There are words which are common to South Indian vocabulary. So, when you're talking to him, when you really, my conversation is much beyond the words themselves. I enter the world of the nomad for just a few seconds, and that's a very special experience for me, because how often do you have like a conversation, a 10-minute or 15-minute conversation about a single word in someone's language with them? What incentive is there for that? And I remember Akhtar Chanal Zehri once said to me that he's got a house and he's got a home in Quetta and elsewhere in Balochistan and one in Karachi, and he's like, I'm in Karachi, and because I'm used to the open plains, I was feeling today so close in the Karachi homes, like such a feeling of claustrophobia, that I went to a mosque, and a really huge mosque, and prayed there. Just socially, I'm like, okay, I lived in Karachi all my life. I don't feel claustrophobic like that, So it's just those kinds of conversations that were happening, a lot has to be, I had to approach these people, so humbly, because I'm asking them such basic questions about their language, the words, have I understood you correctly? And they're very patiently trying to explain to me. So it was a very humbling experience, and you had to be very humble to approach them in order so class, education, so what is important socially, those things disappear in that moment where he's the one telling people how to do this in the studio, very anglicized people, this or that. So really it really helped me, whether Balochi, when we were Mai Dhai, I think Mai Dhai was there. Kadi Avori. This is her. She sang with Atif Aslam. She sang a Marwari song. Yes, in that so she couldn't speak, of course, not English, and she couldn't speak Urdu either. So she really spoke Marwari. So I had to use a team of translators in order to even communicate with her about slight things. And it was really interesting because some of the artists, they hear our requests and they're willing to do a remix, but they don't necessarily see the worth of a remix or a modern remix or a fusion, right? For them, the original is enough. And that's something to take into account also, because it's not like, oh, now we're doing fusion, we have arrived. No. Fusion is in its own place, and the original stuff is its own place. So to observe the expressions on their face when they're like, fine, we'll do it because there's a lot of money involved, but you know what, like, what's the worth of this? And you could see it on the expression. So all of these various undercurrents and other things, and the artists were by and large very willing to come, because you see the exposure that it would get them. I remember I told one artist, look, your song is about, you're a very famous artist inside Pakistan in many ways, but after your song is going to launch next week, and your life is never going to be the same again, ever. You're in your 60s, you had a long singing career, but here you're going to have a huge transformation, because not only will a much larger segment of Pakistan know you, people abroad will know you. They will be, and there will be invitations, and financially it will offer you so much. And he rang me a couple of weeks later, and he's like, Zahra Baba, you were right. Things are never the same again. So people were, it really meant somebody like Rohel Hayat, who's a pop musician and who knows how to package things in a way which is highly digestible for urban and foreign audiences. He can bring such a change in the life of folk artists who are otherwise reliant on folk producers and small town village producers who make videos for them, which are, you would ignore the song because the video was so bad. You know what I mean? So that's the thing. That's what it all meant coming together. So yeah, it was a very, very rich experience to learn the script, because we don't have translation agencies sitting to, translate from Burushaski or even Kashmiri or all of these things. You had to, not only talk to the artist, but also other people, not to triangulate the accuracy of your understanding. So I had to reach out to experts all over the world, Srinagar, Rajasthan, Delhi, various Turkey, so many places. So it really helped build, so many conversations with diverse individuals resulted from this while I was holed up at a library, doing my PhD dissertation, which is fun, but it's just a different experience, Yeah.
Brilliant.
Thank you so much, Zahra, for taking us on that lovely journey, right? Which is actually good because it's helped me formulate this next question which I have in mind. And you talked about this language in Balochistan, where you have this rap element of South Indian languages. You talked about the single sang in Marwari. You talked about your work with translation. And like, I'm thinking with so many tribes, right? So many different traditions. They're all packed in the same geography. It's intense. So are there different expressions of beauty, love, valor in these different dialects and poetic tradition? Is one more softer, other more aggressive, or
more intimate?
More intimate. What has been your experience there?
That's very interesting. I was teaching Urdu literature to a student here in Karachi many years ago at a university, and he told me that he was from the Punjab, and he said, Urdu has very, let's just say, I think he indicated that it has romance which is very worldly and not so mystical. And that's a marker of Urdu. And our Punjabi, he said, it's mystical poetry, which is, considered deeper poetry than just, I could have had a girlfriend or she could have been my wife. But he's like, I could have had a spiritual master, that is considered deeper, in that way. And then, or I could have had God, right? And he said, so this in Punjabi, there's so much more mystical poetry. And Shamsur Rahman Farooqi, who is a really big Urdu critic, very popular in India, he got awards, I think the national awards. He just died earlier this year of COVID in, I think, was it Allahabad? And he said that Urdu was actually different among other Indo-Muslim languages in South Asia, that when it began to become big as a literary language, it was much more what we can see secular, in the sense that it was not the religious poetry, the percentage of religious poetry in Urdu as compared to Sindhi, Punjabi, and many other languages was less, right? And other kinds of human romantic love was more. So it was an interesting observation. And this is the same thing which a student of mine without any training just picked up again. So what is softer and what is harder? I would say that sometimes Urdu can be more cerebral. Urdu poetry, more cerebral. It is stricter to write poetry in Urdu. It's hard, the rules are stricter, ghazal rules, etc. They are stricter in both Persian and Urdu. So they're kind of urbane languages to some degree also, urban centered, urbane, and that it has that sensibility, which is can be a little, even in wildness, it is cerebral and restrained, right? While Punjabi, it's almost like the word they use is kamli, right? Main kamliyan, hadika ke aani. And really it meant, it was like, I'm like, okay, I hope it doesn't come across as weird when I translate it as I'm crazy. Main kamliyan, right? Main kamliyan. So to say that, in Urdu, you word the divana, which doesn't sound as wild as kamli, right? So it's a little more, polished and stylized. So it's a little removed from your most base and wild. Was really wild in that manner. Really just, you really feel, Bulle Shah, you really feel moved to a different extent. And both have their value, right? But really moved to a different extent. And then Pashto, I found it really funny. This is a song called, you must have heard it, Zebhania and Fakhir. Dilruba narazi, pakhanda narazi. So the lyrics, they're all like my beloved. He's not coming. He stopped talking to me. It is not almost when they sing it. Dilruba narazi, pakhanda narazi, khalko bahud yar milad bewafa. So listen, everybody, my beloved has become unfaithful. People ask, they're like, why are they happy about this? So I'm like, okay. So it's like, it's a form of defeat and love, which is like, I think like Bollywood watchers and South Asians in general would relate to this more, because defeat and love is something which is a great preoccupation. It's like, oh, I haven't yet experienced defeat in love, which will give me something to do and compose poetry in love, for which I need to be defeated in love, which is, in the film, Bollywood film Rockstar, he's saying, in order to make better poetry, मैं दिल तोड़ने की machine ढूंढ रहा हूँ. So it's like, you learn that there are certain things which are so wild that they break you. There's a level of pain which is wild and it breaks you. And there's a level of pain which is just fun, at some level. You know what I mean? So it really does reveal that. So yeah, I think, yeah.
When you're talking about it like, so the urban-esque languages are, so they're a little more like, okay, let's not enjoy our pain so much. Let's describe it and leave it out there. Whereas there is something else happening.
I think the urban language wants like Twitter amount of pain, one line, 140 characters, that's enough for me to handle.
I think I'm wondering if it's the actually no, Zahra will be able to tell us better, because I'm imagining that actually there's a little sharpness, and there's far more sharpness in a Punjabi, or in the kind of grief, or in the kind of pain, or the kind of anger that you can feel there versus an Urdu.
Reshma was helping me understand another song once. She had introduced me to this song, where I think the guy starts, I think it's Noori, the band.
Right.
And he's talking about his love, his feeling, and eventually saying, Tere ghar ko aag lag jaye. This is a lover who's pining for love. And he's saying, I hope your house burns. And I said, why is he saying that?
I think it was more maybe like, if your house burns, perhaps, then a scenario where that happens or something. But yeah, I think I would say that I wouldn't say the level that one language is capable of expressing pain less than the another, no. But I would say that the adab of that, they would what happens in poetry also doesn't necessarily reflect what happens in society. People understand two things very differently. But there's a thing definitely that this if there's a death that happens, right, at the rural level, I've seen in Punjab, people actually ban karte hain. They lament in a singing way. Oh, he's left me, what will I do? Oh my God. And it's very sincere. And they're like, oh, and then they beat their head or they beat themselves, and people come and grab them, look, get her water. But if somebody is like much more urbane, they might just sit like this in terrible pain without expressing it. And just their stillness would be, a reflection of how deep the pain is. So when you went soft and hard or passionate or less, so it's really like maybe about what's allowed in expression. Like in terms of class also, lamentation and all, education levels, these things, they become different, right? And also let's talk a little bit about one thing which is, very big in the rest of the languages in Pakistan, and not in Urdu, which is essentially really not a Pakistani language in the sense that it was not born in Pakistan. It's an Indian language, yes? So I think Javed Naqvi, who is a journalist in India, he wrote an article for Dawn. He was reporting that there were some qawwals from India who were visiting Pakistan, and there were people in the Pakistani audience requested them to sing Heer Ranjha or Soni Mahiwal or something. So these are people, these are love pairs of lovers which are very famous at the folk level in Pakistan. Heer Ranjha, Soni Mahiwal, Mumal Rano, Sassi Punnu. So, from Balochistan, from Punjab, from Sindh, these are pairs of lovers, right? Marvi and others. So they are not known in North India, they aren't. So when they heard about their love, so it's also an interesting thing because of course India and Pakistan have so much in common. They have three major languages which are in common today. One is English, into which we are able to understand each other and read each other's materials. One is English. The second is Urdu Hindi. And the third is Punjabi. These are the three really major languages. Sindhi to a much, much less extent because it's not as important, right? There's a much smaller community of Sindhis in India. So, so these are the three major languages. But when Indian Muslims, sometimes if they're Pakistani, then they're interacting, they are even more than other South Asians, they may have the element in common of religious and cultural and literary elements in common, but at the same time there's also like we are two different countries, so we're competing a little bit. So there's little fun taunts to each other because they are two different countries, they are two different experiences. 70 years, it creates certain kinds of commonalities on between citizens which other citizens can't share, right? So they were like, they heard these stories of what happened in Heer Ranjha, Sassi Punnu, and so they're like, so do all the girls run away for love in Pakistan? So the Kawaz asked, which is a kind of a taunt, in the mehfil. They're like, so they're like, if you fall in love, then you run away from love and you run out in the field and then you die for it. But it was a little this thing. But the interesting thing is, there's a writer called Laura Ring. She's written a book on Karachi, anthropological book on a Karachi apartment building about many ethnicities living in an apartment building. And she said that, even though it's extolled so much in our poetry, in Urdu poetry, you see, because it's got a more Persian, like a Perso-Arabic sensibility. So it really doesn't talk about the South Asian earth so much, the soil so much. It takes the grammar and the vocabulary of South Asia, but the image is very like classical Persian. That's the sensibility of Urdu. That is the sensibility of mainstream Urdu poetry. So they talk about Laila Majnu, who are Arab lovers. They talk about Shirin Farhad, who are Iranian lovers. Yes. So they talk about these pairings, but they don't talk about somehow local lovers so much. But Sindhi and Punjabi and these other languages, Siraiki, they do talk about local image, local myths and folklore to quite a degree. And in that prominent thing is that there's a woman the song Khediyan de Naal, Mein Jana Khediyan de Naal. So Heer and Ranjha, and Heer is she wants to be with Ranjha, but they are marrying her off to Nahi Mein Jana Khediyan de Naal. They're marrying her off to into a tribe called the Khedas, right? And she says, I refuse to do that. And and eventually she does die because she can't stand that experience of being untrue to her love of Ranjha. And so it really is a parable for divine love, right? That I can't leave the straight, the truthful path, and I can't be distracted by the world, and I must go for God, right? So these things are parables. So even though going all out for love, it's totally celebrated completely in this poetry and extolled to like cut off all ties and like attract bands of people who are trying to kill you because you're trying to run away with someone who you love, is so much extolled in the poetry. People on the ground, somehow it's understood to be poetry. And this is what this anthropologist Laura Ring observed, that this is not the behavior which is promoted traditionally, where you expect it to make practical choices. And so it's a parable. Yes. So this is the entire thing. It's like to go crazy in love. So these are this is the mizaj. This is the temperament of this kind of poetry here. But it doesn't necessarily reflect on us. A total picture of the social values. Poetic values are one thing, real social values another thing. However, of course, you can use it. There are people who might choose to live that way, and they will use the example of this poetry for that. So I hope I've answered your question. I think I went on a tangent, but it was a point to make.
It was incredibly fun. I think it was a beautiful journey, and I think it's leaving so many questions. I am conscious of the time, but I'm not able to stop myself. I think it's beautiful the way you talk about, like, there are these poetic values, and there is a poetic dharma of sorts that you follow your love on that path, and that is the righteous path. That is the path to follow, and you drag the world down with you if you have to, for the sake of that love. Whereas on the other side, there's completely something else happening in society. And is there something that as someone who studies language and as someone who is able to decipher these things this way, when you saw it coming together in Coke Studio, becoming something of, you're bringing back something to cultural consciousness that is around the sidelines. It's there as literature and something to say, hey, this is our heritage, but let's not go too deep into it, which is, I think, a case the world over. It's not like we're celebrating Madame Bovary, right? It's not like we're saying, oh, what a beautiful, that's how women should be. No one's saying that.
Yeah.
Anna Karenina. No one is doing that. We love our Shakuntala. We don't want any in real life. Yeah, so when you were bringing this to a modern time, right? That can you do you know what it must have been like, or do you have anything you can tell us about the times in which these stories came out and they became popular culture and stayed up to here, and then now they've gotten dug a little bit into whatever is the scene right now? And then when you're bringing something like Coke Studio and these beautiful almost sweet rebellions come out, did they have an impact? Did you feel that they were doing something to open up minds, to bring back that why not in society? I know it's a two-part question. It's a very large, broad question, but however you interpret it.
I think it's just your sensibilities are not completely transformed. Really, it's for whoever wants to go how deep into it. On the music, they say music is a universal language. Yes, I think music is possibly the only universal language, because words mean different things to different people, right? So possibly music is something which helps everyone. In Kangna the Kavali, or other kinds of things, they help people reach a particular kind of plane. A lot of people say it's like a trance effect, right? So that's something which is quite likely. But in terms of I'd like to say one thing. It was a lovely experience for me, for everybody. I'm so happy that this entire thing happened. Of course, I would be happy. But it's also the fact that it became the most popular thing rather than just a popular thing in a time period is also a reflection of a dying culture. So our culture, the reason why covers are the most popular thing right now is because originals just cannot compete. If Coke Studio had emerged like 50 years ago, I don't think it would have had the same, occupied the same space in society. Today, just in the last 4 months, I've been going to a lot of school events and college events, and I'm like, okay, I've heard 90% of the songs that are being sung here, 95%. Even though I'm in my 30s, but I've heard 90% of the songs these young people are singing, the Desi songs, and I've translated 80% of them. So, which is like, I thought that's kind of like a huge number, which is, and these are songs which were originally created like many, many decades ago. Yes, at least 20 decades, if not 50 or 100 or 200 or 300. Yes. So then it can also be something pessimistic. So I would say that it has impact, like led to a change in the sense that modern artists are more interested in doing folk than they would have been otherwise. Bollywood has taken a turn towards Punjabi folk after Coke Studio. You see mystical Punjabi folk showing up in Bollywood in ways which were probably not happening to that extent before. Bhangra music was happening, but not this kind of mystical, music. However, until and unless we do stop the educational processes which are leading to a loss of language in I wouldn't say South Asia, because Bangladesh is apparently it's an ethno-national state which really has one main language. They're able to safeguard Bengali in a way which is much better than India and Pakistan is able to safeguard any of their languages. So we are, unlike Afghanistan, where Persian and Dari and Pashto are doing much better, unlike Iran, where Farsi is one of the strongest languages, and all of the Middle East where Arabic is doing well. India and Pakistan have a really bad situation. It's going to impact all the arts. We're not going to be we're not capitalizing on our cultural strengths, and we are listening to Coke Studio, we're absorbing some of it, but until and unless we stop this educational drift away, this aesthetic and psychological drift away from local literary culture, which is happening to the education system, we're not going to have a very full understanding of even Coke Studio music by the people who are the musicians who are playing it, and the artists who are singing it, and the people who are going to be listening to it later. So it's going to be partial, I would say.
It's an interesting point of view that the reason that they become such favorites is because they're dying. And
because everything else is dying. That's why. Because actually music is dying. That's why old music is repackaged. Old music is becoming that popular.
Very interesting. Very interesting point of view. Do we have time to take questions?
Yeah.
Let me see. Yes.
We do have some time to take some questions from the audience.
Okay. Clearly, there are lots of comments here. I think they've
helped me a bit. But while you go out there, one important question we heard, some story of you. Was it refusing to write the lyrics in the song in a Roman? The script?
We were reading an article and we were reading something to we were talking about how when you were writing the lyrics of something, you said, no, let's use the actual script, or let's not use the anglicized script or use a Romanized English script, or let's use an actual script that's there. What is the impact of reading in your own script, and what does that do to?
Yeah. So, India is linguistically like probably the most diverse country in the world, perhaps. It's a huge, we always, when we talk about multilingualism, we use the example of India, yes? Pakistan was also significantly linguistically diverse. And here, Urdu is the national language, and Sindhi is the only other official language in a major way. Unlike India, which has many other official Bengali and others. So because there's somehow the major reason is that the demand is not many other languages, there's so much in common with Urdu, there's not so much demand for other languages to occupy official domains. So in Sindh, there's Sindhi. So the thing is that many people, that's true for probably the smaller languages in India, who speak Pashto, the vast majority, one could even say 98 or 99% of Punjabi and Pashto speakers don't have the experience of seeing, their language written. So they learn from the air, they speak, and they never come across it in writing. Of course, specialists and universities have these books which are related to their language, but they don't. So we thought that this would be a way that Roman is okay, good enough, but in order to consider that language as important as Urdu, why should Urdu just be like given special treatment that, okay, Urdu is written in Farsi or something like that. But they should be able to see these languages written in their script. So when we did Bengali a little bit with Alamgir, who was, the cross-Pakistan artist, we put it in Bengali script with the generous help from Bengali friends from India or Bangladesh. So we wanted people to see that, to be able to increase literacy in their own language. Because unlike in India, you see what happened in India is that each language, I think the scripts are not mutually intelligible. They're based on it's like the Devanagari, and then Bengali is written and Punjabi is Gurmukhi and Punjabi. Exactly, you can't just because you read Devanagari, you can't read. Because you read Urdu, you can read Pashto. There are a few extra letters, but then you can. So you just should see your word represented, how it looks, on paper or on a screen. So this was a project where we tried to do that, and because when people get used to reading it, they already speak it. Then they know how to write it one day also. So they'll be able to read books in it also once they get practice. So that was that angle. Yes.
Fantastic. Okay, brilliant. Zahra, I feel like we need to have one fest where we can just have like one 12-hour long conversation with you. I feel terrible that we're out of time, guys. I would urge you to get in touch with all of your questions, with anything that you want to talk about with Zahra. She's absolutely delightful too. This conversation was just so mind-opening, and there are so many more questions. There is so much, and I'm really hoping that we'll be able to get in touch with you again and just have a conversation and talk about this, your profound knowledge and your experience in this entire thing, and bringing something that is so distant and so old, and bringing it up to right now.
Thank you. It was really great conversing. Thank you for your lovely questions, and for it's just you feel so close to be able to share love for a common thing. So it's been a lovely conversation. Thank you very much. It was lovely to talk to you.
The pleasure is all ours. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Zahra. Have a fantastic weekend ahead. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.